Welcome back to another episode of Stories from the Field Mental Health in the Outdoors. I'm your host, Will White. I'm excited to bring you the last episode of season 23, where I asked every guest to share an impactful story of how an outdoor experience impacted their mental health. I'm excited to announce that we are now on YouTube. So check out the video version of this episode, and I will put the links in the show notes. The next season, season 24, summer 2025, of this podcast will focus on boys and men and how outdoor experiences can help their mental health. Stay tuned as I just returned from a men's adventure retreat, and we will be diving into that and much more in future episodes. In today's episode, I talk with Kate Baum Mettenbrink, who is the Director of Risk Management for the National Outdoor Leadership School, often referred to as NOLS, and she shares information about the upcoming Wilderness Risk Management Conference that will take place in Portland, Maine on September 30th through October 2nd, and I am definitely looking forward to attending. Katie also dives into how outdoors experiences and expeditions helped her grow personally and professionally, and how she is raising a son to learn that everything is better in the outdoors. I want to ask y'all to do something for me, and that's to go to the podcast on any platform that you listen to us on and rate it and subscribe on YouTube to help us reach more listeners. And you can explore over 270 past episodes of this podcast at storiesfromthefield.com. I also want to bring up that if you're interested in men's coaching or retreats, check out my new project, the White Mountain Adventure Institute at WMAI.org. Check out that website. As I always like to say, everyone has a story to share, and if we truly listen, we can learn. So grab your earbuds, step outside, and let's dive into another compelling conversation. So grateful to welcome my guest, Kate Baum Mettenbrink. Welcome to Stories from the Field.
Thanks. It's so good to be here. Thanks for having me.
I'm so excited to have you talk about the Wilderness Risk Management Conference that's coming up this fall
That's
in
right.
Portland, Maine, but also about your career in risk management. You're the risk management director at the National Outdoor Leadership School, and 21 years you've been with the organization.
That's right. Yeah.
Wow. Tell us, what brought you to NOLS? What was were you always interested in the outdoors, or what's your journey into this segment of the outdoor field?
I know. How long do you have on the podcast? Try to give you the short version. I have always been interested in the outdoors, but my family didn't do like adventurous outdoor activities. We played in the dirt and played in parks and stuff. I grew up in Portland, Oregon, but we didn't go camping as a family or like rock climbing or any of that kind of stuff. And I didn't really have an obvious entry into learning about those things. And I went to college, and the place that I went to school had a really robust outdoor orientation program for freshmen. And I was really excited about that because it seemed like a way to get into that world and start to learn some skills. And I went on a freshman orientation backpacking trip and just loved it. It was really difficult and really new. And the challenge was inspiring to me and made me want to learn more. And I became a student leader while I was in college with our outdoor program and opened my eyes to the outdoor industry through that experience. And I learned about NOLS in the course of my education in outdoor experiential activities in college, I learned about NOLS. And after I graduated, I was trying to figure out what to do in the outdoors, and I really wanted to spend time outside, but I didn't know how to do that in a way that you might be able to make a living. And so I did some other things. I taught school and worked as a political organizer and tried to like go on climbing trips on my own and get experience, and eventually made my way to a instructor course at NOLS. And I thought that might be a good option for a summer job in between teaching school and like piecing other things together. And I was excited to get back to leading trips. And I went on an instructor course with NOLS in 2003. And I just fell head over heels in love with everything about it, with my course mates and with NOLS as an organization and the extended expedition model of learning and education. And I was so inspired by what we accomplished together and how much people learned and how much we were able to do that we didn't know we could do at the beginning. And the idea of being able to be part of experiences like that for other people, especially people new to the outdoors, like a lot of NOLS students, was just such an inspiring opportunity. I had never been so excited to do anything in my life at the age of 24. And I have been working at NOLS ever since. I was a field instructor and did that as my primary job, working full time as a field instructor for a number of years at NOLS. And then I've been in several different administrative roles since then at the organization also.
So 21 years, 22 years, you said this?
Almost 22 this fall.
Yeah. Oh. You must be one of the long-standing staff there. Is that correct, or am I off in that?
There's a number of us. I'm getting to be in that group. And NOLS, at least for some portion of our staff, NOLS is sticky like that. And I am lucky to have spent the last 2 decades of my life and career at this organization. And I have a number of peers who have been here similar amounts of time and who I've had the privilege of learning from and working with.
And now you're the director of risk management. You've been that for a couple years, right? Or is that
Year and a half.
year and a half?
Yeah, just a year and a half. My predecessor was in this job for 29 years and he retired in January of 2024.
Yeah.
And I am relatively new in this job, and in some ways I feel like I've been training for it for a long time. And my connection and work with the Wilderness Risk Management Conference has been part of that. Certainly, I've gotten a lot of my risk management education through the WRMC.
By being part of that conference committee, and we got to give a shout out to the previous director, Drew Lehman,
That's
who
right.
I knew way back in the day. He's an older guy like myself, and you were mentored by him and
That's
many
right.
others, and then you had been very active in the risk management conference for a long time.
A long time. Yeah, I've been on the steering committee since 2012. And the steering committee is the group of people that oversees the educational content of the conference and like the attendee experience. And I was the chair of that committee and the chair of the conference for a few years in a previous professional role here at NOLS, and then have continued on the committee since then.
What drew you to risk management?
Oh gosh, it's the DNA of what we do on NOLS expeditions and in our wilderness medicine program as well. It's like really at the foundation of what makes everything else we do possible. And navigating like real risk and consequence in that expedition setting is dynamic and challenging, and there's no recipe for it. As people, I'm probably speaking to people who already know that, your listeners of the podcast, but that was always just so challenging and interesting. And I think it's one of the things that we do really well at NOLS. and both on the ground in the field, like on the sharp end of the rope,
Mhm.
so to speak, but also NOLS as an organization, I think does a really nice job of having systems and structure that support our field program and puts a lot of trust in our field staff, but also there is a lot of infrastructure that's backing them up, setting them up with good practices and good emergency response systems and like trying to help move the whole profession forward from a thought leadership standpoint. So that's one of the things I have really loved about working at NOLS. And I went to the risk management conference as a field instructor my very first year at NOLS in 2003. I was amazed at the level of conversation that was happening there, way beyond NOLS. All these organizations that had common goals of trying to provide positive educational experiences to students and participants and really doing something profound in the outdoors and doing their best to take good care of people in that process and take good care of their organizations. People talking about mistakes that they had made and sharing learning with competitor organizations, I thought was like really unique in the work that I had been involved in up to that point. That idea at the WRMC, the like rising tide lifts all boats concept and sharing practices that work well makes all of our organizations better and helps us like grow the pie of potential participants rather than feeling like we need to snatch our little piece of the pie and keep everyone else out. That's the spirit of the conference, sharing of ideas and sharing of practices. And as a brand new field instructor, the idea of being a part of a community like that just made me like I felt like I belonged in that and felt like there was so much opportunity to learn. Then later, when I became involved in the steering committee, like as a NOLS administrator, I continued to want to offer that the conference be a place for people like the version of myself a decade before.
Some people who listen to this podcast actually aren't as familiar as Knowles as we might think. So give us a quick snippet of Knowles right now. How many courses do you offer in a year, and how many people are enrolling in a average year?
Yeah, great. So we have about 4,000 students on expeditionary field programs in a year, and something like, I don't know, 18 to 20,000 students on wilderness medicine programs that are primarily classroom based. And so we have both expedition and wilderness medicine students all throughout the year. We operate all over the world. We have campuses around the Western US as well as in the Adirondacks in the Northeast. And then we have international campuses in Mexico and Chile and Patagonia and India, East Africa, and New Zealand. And then we have a campus in Alaska as well.
Mm.
And then wilderness medicine operates, they don't need campus infrastructure to run medical courses. And we offer those all over the world in many more countries than we have campuses. And we operate year round. Expeditions anywhere from 7 days to a whole academic year. And we have a lot of students from North America, but we run courses for local students in all the places that we operate as well.
Wow. And during the pandemic, you shut down for a while.
We sure
And
did.
yes, that was a whole story in itself.
Yeah.
And then the numbers started to come back, but are you back to pre-pandemic
No,
enrollments? Yeah.
no, we're
So,
not. We're not. We were only actually closed and not running any programs for a few months, like March to July of that first pandemic year. But then many of our international campuses stayed closed for 1 or 2 or even 2.5 years
mhm.
with all the international border challenges and travel restrictions and stuff. We are only really back to having all the places open that we had before very recently. And there are some programs that we were operating pre-COVID that we're not right now,
Mhm.
that just didn't survive our pandemic closures. Our numbers, our semester student numbers, as well as like our big season is Boreal summer, so June through August. And in both of those places, we're not back to the numbers that we were pre-COVID.
Though very reflective of the outdoor field in
Ex
general, from
exactly.
Outward Bound to NOLS to wilderness experience courses to summer camps to wilderness
Wilderness
therapy,
therapy, right.
everything has retrenched. What's your theory of why that is?
Oh, geez, if I had the answer to that, I would be in a different job probably.
Well,
And
you're a risk
but
manager, so you think about worrisome things. So give me something.
yeah, there's a lot of big trends that NOLS is only one part of people having mental health challenges and higher levels of anxiety. And we hear from our gap year colleagues that they are seeing fewer students wanting to do things outside of their comfort zone and people being away from home for extended periods of time and being disconnected. We both see for some students and their families that being a huge draw to outdoor education right now because people know how healthy and important it is to have a break from screens and be able to make like real in-person genuine connections with other humans. And so we see some people that are saying we need this now more than ever. And that's certainly the camp that we fall in and believing that what we have to offer people need more than ever and convincing people to put down their devices and take time out of their super busy schedules where they like in a teenager's summer they're doing 15 different things and making space for an expedition as one of those
Mhm.
that's like multiple weeks long or leaving your college or university for a whole semester to do something that's like scary and unknown. I think that's a harder sell post pandemic. Internally, we do all kinds of things to get in our own way at Knowles that we have lots to learn from our colleagues about, like having a functional website and being able to describe the value proposition of that kind of education.
Mm.
And I don't think Knowles is the only place that has challenges with that, but
Yeah.
that's we certainly have some of those.
What do you think the most pressing issues are in the outdoor industry right now and the risk management aspects of it?
Yeah, changes and accelerating pace of change with climate impacts is a big one. It'd be hard to think of something that's more pressing or more daunting than that. I think the climate resiliency work that some organizations are embarking on and that we've started talking about at the risk management conference is really important pressing work for the industry. And I have colleagues, former Knowles colleagues that are doing other things now. A guy named Brendan Madden, who has worked for Knowles and Outward Bound Canada. And then a woman named Shauna Tartar, who's also a former Knowles person. And both of them have been involved in the risk management conference for decades. They are really pushing work to encourage organizations to be building climate resiliency plans and recognizing that the way that we've often managed risk in our organizations is by looking back at what has happened and trying to extract learning from data and experiences and thinking about the likelihood of a bad outcome and the consequences of certain bad outcomes. And what they're trying to get people to think about is what has happened in the past is not a blueprint for what to be concerned about in the future, given the accelerating pace of change in natural phenomena, wildfires, storm events, wildfire smoke, flooding, big events like Helene in North Carolina last year. They, it's, we can't simply look at what we have done until now and prepare for that. We need to be prepared for the unexpected and we need to be like resilient and flexible enough that we can adapt when these quote unquote unprecedented events affect our operations. So that's a big one. And that's got classroom impacts, like places that we used to go may or may not continue to be available. It's got emergency preparedness implications for like large scale, fast moving wildfires or smoke events or kind of hurricanes, flooding, other large weather events or landslides, things of that nature. And then it's got big financial implications for organizations being financially resilient to absorb a closure or a impact to operations from some kind of climate related event that we know those things are going to become more frequent, more extreme, and not predictable. So I'd put that at the top of my list. And then the other thing I'm thinking about a lot is the our connectedness with devices and access to information. Both our students and our potential field staff are growing up and living in a world, as are we, as are you and I, living in a world where we have access to like immediate information in most aspects of our life. We expect answers quickly. We expect like immediate gratification. When we have a problem, we expect to be able to get help right away. And that changes our problem solving skills and our decision making experiences in the world. It's one of the great things that we can offer our participants and staff is a different paradigm and a different opportunity to solve problems without being able to just ask Siri the answer or being able to live in some uncertainty and not having an immediate answer. But the way that we adapt our programs to teach people how to do that in a world where they might not have those skills from the rest of their life, like navigating with a paper map, that's becoming obsolete. And we're still teaching that at NOLS right now. But I think there's some significant cultural and social shifts and trends in there that we need to pay attention to, we need to adapt to, we need to think about how much are we offering people a set of new skills and how much are we going to need to train them to do things that people used to come in more familiar with. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So that is like, how are we going to meet people's desires and needs for information in an incident, as an example?
yeah.
And are people going to accept information lags, or are people going to be willing to accept the mistakes that are inevitable when you're operating in a dynamic remote environment? And how do we talk to our participants about that so they know what to expect, and their families and our staff?
Yeah, the immediacy of that people want information because we're trained to it by being online all the time, and it's fascinating. Let's remind people, what are the dates of the wilderness therapies excuse me, what contains a wilderness risk management conference this fall in Portland, Maine?
That's right. Portland, Maine, September 30th to October 2nd. And that's the main conference, and there are some pre-conference workshops that happen before that as well. We will be at a Holiday Inn by the Bay in Portland, Maine. I think that's
Downtown Portland. No,
yeah,
it's the biggest conference space, being closer to Maine than you are.
yes,
It's the biggest conference space in Portland at this moment.
that's right. We think it's really the only thing of that size in
That
the
size.
immediate vicinity. That's right.
Because how many people attend that conference?
Oh gosh, similar to other things, the risk management conference isn't quite as big as it was before COVID. When we were in Portland, Maine last time, we had something like 560 attendees, and I would expect this year will be more in the like 400 zone, 350 to 400. And we never quite know until a few weeks before the conference how big it's going to be. But if I had to guess, 400-ish.
Wow. And this season, I'm asking everybody to share a story where a time in the outdoors impacted their mental health. Would you share one with me now?
Yeah. When I think of my own mental health and the outdoors, I think about times that I have felt like full of purpose and self efficacy and connection. I'm not sure if you're looking for a mental health challenge, but my experience in the outdoors, like leading trips and spending time by myself and with my family. I have a 7-year-old, and he just went on his first backpacking trip a couple months ago. And he is like happier outside than any other time. My husband and I always say everything is better outside. And it really seems like that's true with our son. And that was true for me. I can think of lots of hard moments and like big storms and big arguments and challenging decisions and like steep passes and deep snow and fast rivers and things like that. I think I have never felt more connected to other humans or have as much clarity of purpose as I had leading expeditions. And similar with my 7-year-old, like a month and a half ago, we were walking out of the canyons in southern Utah and we got a really big snowstorm our last night in the field. And myself and 2 other adults were there with 3 kids, ages 6 to 8. And the clarity of purpose that the 6 of us had walking out of the canyons in 8 inches of snow and snow falling from the sky with our little people and like trying to keep them warm and motivated to keep walking towards the car. It's just like an old course. And there was like no worrying about my email or the maintenance that needs to happen at my house or whether my kids like math test results were gonna be good or not. None of that. It was like we just need to walk to the car and keep drinking sugary drinks. Just like an old course. It's such a gift to have such singular purpose. It's like very rare in life, and the mental clarity that comes with that and the like feeling of self-efficacy when you do something really hard with a group of people is something special. And certainly it's the best thing I've ever done for my mental health, I would say.
Mm. Good role modeling for your son too, right? And the other
We try.
and what's one piece of advice you would give to a new program director in the outdoor field right now? And because we're dealing with so much risk, what would the one thing you would advise that person?
Yeah. I would tell them to focus on their the well-being of their participants and their staff. Let the well-being of their organization flow from that. And so, especially as a director, if they're thinking about liability and paperwork and all the other things on their plate, I would tell them to do what they can to stay focused on running a good program that prioritizes the health and well-being of the humans that they're working with. And that's going to be the best way for them to manage risk to their organization. That's easier said than done, but remembering that everything that they're doing, if they're trying to run a good program that is going to care for their people, that's a good start. And then I would say think about the risks that they're taking and what the point is. If they're doing something, if the risks that they're taking are in service to the objectives of the organization and their mission or the educational goals of their business or whatever it is, and they're taking risks that make sense in that context, that's a good North Star.
And I would recommend they attend the Wilderness Risk Management Conference in
Yes.
Portland, Maine.
Good one.
And
Yeah, you teed that up and I blew
in
right past
fact,
it. Yeah, that's it. That's
well,
the
you're
best.
like being on the conference committee and doing all that work, and this is the busiest time of year. So I'm so grateful you were able to join me and share so much about what's going on at NOLS and for yourself and for the Wilderness Risk Management Conference. So, Katie Baum Mettenbrink, thank you so much for sharing your story on Stories from the Field.
Thanks so much, Will. It's a pleasure chatting with you.